Hello and welcome to the Paul Green Comedy Podcast for November 26th, 2024. This is episode 334. Stand-up comedian, actor, improviser, and dreamer, Paul Green, coming to you sharing my journey as I pursue my dreams in the hopes that you might pursue yours as well. So, I am currently hanging out in a cheap motel in Palm Springs, California, getting some work done. I took a road trip yesterday to Los Angeles, California, back to Hollywood. For a special occasion. My commercial agent in California was celebrating his 60th birthday. And he celebrated that birthday in true Los Angeles fashion by having a stand-up comedy show that he produced. And he had a handful of his clients perform in the show. And so I drove out to show support and to touch base. And, 80% of life is showing up. And so even though it was going to be a long round trip drive of about 12 hours, I went, he's a good agent to me. He's been supportive of me, and he didn't drop me when I moved away from Los Angeles, which meant a lot to me because I think a lot of agents just would have been, this guy's not in LA. We don't got time for him anymore. But not this agent. So he still has me on his roster, still sends me out for auditions. Fortunately, the industry has changed so much that almost all initial auditions are, done remotely. They're all self-tapes. A phenomenon that it started happening before the pandemic, where casting agencies started asking for self-tapes somewhat regularly, but once the pandemic hit, then obviously all auditions went to self-tape, and that hasn't. I mean, it's gone back a little bit since the pandemic. I mean, there are now some auditions that are back to in person, but for the most part, it's almost all self-tape now. And so even though I'm in Arizona, he will still send me out on auditions for Los Angeles that are, that are just self-tape. So I'll be able to submit. So, really good guy. I'm really fortunate that, he signed me to his roster and still works with me through all of these years. I've been with him now, for a good 5 years, I think. I think maybe I signed on with him around 2018, 2019. So it was really fun. Driving back out to Los Angeles, the comedy show was at the Hollywood Improv, which is a very iconic comedy club in Hollywood. And the Improvs are a national comedy brand. There's actually a improv in Tempe, where I live, right up the street from me, actually. And then the Desert Ridge Improv is in North Phoenix. I did a show there with my buddy Josh Novi a couple weeks ago. But yeah, there's improvs all over the country. And so it's just cool being at those clubs, these iconic clubs where any famous comedian you can think of by name has performed, because it's Hollywood. It's one of the top comedy clubs. There's kind of like the big three right there in Hollywood. So there's the Hollywood Improv, there's the Comedy Store, and then there's the Laugh Factory. And all three of those comedy clubs are within a few miles of each other in Hollywood. And on any given night, you can show up to one of those clubs and have a high probability that you're going to see a major comedy celebrity. So even last night, in the very showroom that we were performing in, or that my agent was having his show in, the show right after that was produced by Dion Cole. I don't know if any of you guys know Dion Cole out there, but he was a writer on the Conan O'Brien show. He used to come out and do segments. And he's I think he has a Netflix special. Really, really funny, talented stand-up comedian and pretty darn famous. He's actually doing a bunch of Old Spice commercials now, too. So, once you get the Old Spice commercial, you have officially made it in Hollywood. So, yeah, so they had to rush us out of the showroom because Dion Cole was going to be next. And then, so the Hollywood Improv has two stages. So they have their main stage, and then they have the lab, and the lab is their kind of smaller performance space. But on the main stage that night, I looked up and saw that Tiffany Haddish was performing on the main stage. So, just all kinds of brushing shoulders with the celebs out there. Although I didn't actually see Dion Cole or Tiffany Haddish, or Dion Cole and Tiffany Haddish, but we were in the same building last night, and it's just fun. It's just fun to go back to Hollywood and just be sort of in that environment again. That is definitely one thing that I've missed since I've moved away from Los Angeles. I lived there from 2014 until 2022, and that was always fun. Just being there where the industry is, and it was really fun. I ran into a couple of friends that I hadn't seen in a long time, comedians who. One of my comedian friends, his name is Howard, really, really funny guy. He and I met when I first moved out to Los Angeles. We met in a comedy class, and almost 8 years ago. And we've crossed paths many times, and he happened to be at the show last night, and I hadn't seen him or talked to him in a long time. And it was really, really fun to see him again, and he's doing well. And he's he's a funny comedian. He combines kind of this faux poetry style to where he actually has like a notebook of poems, and in the middle of his act he'll be like, the next poem is entitled, and then he'll do these kind of funny like poetry style monologues in his stand-up comedy. He was also a flight attendant for 40 years, so he does a bunch of jokes about what it's like being a straight male flight attendant and all kinds of fun stuff. And then another buddy I ran into is a guy named Michael, and Michael works for Warner Brothers, and he works actually in their casting department. He's like a casting director assistant. And I met him randomly at another birthday party for a friend of mine who is an actress and singer. She's been very successful. She was pretty much raised in Hollywood. Her parents were both actors. And so she was just raised to be a performer. And she's very musical, very, very talented. And she, gosh, I wish I could remember what it was called. Her name's Darcy Rose. So if you look up Darcy Rose, she was a voiceover actress, and she voiced some sort of princess on like a Disney Channel show, some sort of cartoon that was pretty big. It's not one of like the Disney musicals. She wasn't like the voice of Elsa or nothing, but it was like a Disney cartoon TV show about princesses. And again, she was one of the voices of the princesses. So she and I met at like a comedy festival, and because she was musical and did improv, I actually was in a music improv troupe with her for a little while. And so she invited me to her birthday party. And at this birthday party, I met this gentleman named Michael, who was, again, worked for Warner Brothers. And he and I just kind of hit it off, became kind of instant friends. And what was cool about Michael is because he worked for Warner Brothers, he actually drives to the Warner Brothers lot every day for work. And then he's able to like have guests and, you know, invite like friends and stuff just to come to the Warner Brothers lot. So he and I actually went to lunch, and I got like a pass to go to Warner Brothers and go to his production office on the actual lot. And then he and I went to the Warner Brothers sort of cafeteria or whatever and had lunch. And, you know, while we're walking, he's like, oh, yeah, over there's the cast of this show. Oh, yep, there's the cast of that show over there. Just everybody kind of just hanging out. And that was a really cool experience, just to be like, oh my gosh, I'm on the actual Warner Brothers lot with the big water tower and everything. And so he happened to be at the show. I was able to catch up with him. And I'll tell you, you know, I talk a lot about on this podcast about, you know, going for your dreams and manifestation and focusing and visualizing and taking action. And, you know, it just kind of is a reminder to me that's like, man, I really went for it out there and made just such incredible connections. And I think maybe even at the time I sort of took it for granted. And now that I'm back in Arizona, I'm not geographically in that location, but you know, I still have the same dream, and I'm still pursuing it. And still trying to foster all the relationships and opportunities that are available to me here in Arizona, and I'm still dreaming big. So I haven't really felt any inclination to move back to Los Angeles, you know, at this time. I thought about it briefly about a year ago. I was like, yeah, maybe I should look at maybe trying to get back to LA. I even did a little bit of research on potential places I could stay, places I might be able to like rent a room. And but yeah, there's just something inside me that says that this chapter in my life and the way that the industry has completely changed over the last 5 years since the explosion of streaming services, of social media, of the internet, you know, the pandemic really has shifted the landscape a lot. I just feel a lot better about where I'm at now, where I'm living now, and what I'm up to and what I'm doing. And if that ever changes, you know, I'll cross that bridge if and when I come to it. But it's always just fun to go back to LA and just to reconnect with those people that I met and, you know, those experiences that I had just being out in Hollywood, where all the magic happens. So that was really fun and a good reminder of, you know, like, hey, I went for it and I did the best I could. Life changed, and, you know, circumstances happened where I moved away from LA and moved back home to Phoenix, but I don't regret any of it. I don't regret any of it. I don't regret moving there. I don't regret the experiences I had. I don't regret that I moved back, even though the reason I moved back ended up being a pretty tough situation for me, and I don't regret being home. So no regrets, everybody. No regrets. So with that, ironically enough, let's talk about Mind Magic. And it's actually the last chapter of Mind Magic. I have gone through that book, and really enjoyed it. I've actually watched some more YouTube videos of the author. He's got, he's kind of at the point now to where he's getting on all of the big podcast shows and stuff. And the uh, the last chapter is entitled "The Journey Home," and he really just brings his sort of life story full circle, because his story starts out how, he had achieved everything that he wanted, but he was miserable. And by achieved everything that he wanted, it was really he achieved all of his financial goals. So this guy was an incredibly wealthy scientist and doctor and brain surgeon. And, he starts the book talking about how he had the big mansion, he had a Ferrari, he had a Porsche, he had a house on the beach, and, was about to buy an island for like $40 million. And then talked about how I think it was the tech boom, one of the big stock market crashes, pretty much wiped out all of his wealth overnight. And then he was completely broke and he had to sell everything that he owned. And how also at that time, his relationship with his wife, he was going through divorce and his kid couldn't stand him or something like that, It's kind of that typical story where he had all the material possessions, but he didn't have what was really important. And so the end of the book is about how he was able to shift his manifestations and really learned to focus on what was really important to him, which was his family and his kids, and that now he had a home that was full of family. And I think he said his in-laws or maybe his grandparents or something, were living on the property, and that at night they would go out and make barbecue and cook pizzas and, and help his kids with his homework and all that stuff. So, it's a good kind of wrap up of his story of his life and his thoughts and feelings on manifestation, and that you really can manifest what you want, but to be cautious of what it is that you really want, because he thought what he wanted was, the house, the cars, and the Rolex, but that ended up leaving him very miserable and unhappy when he got it. And so now later in his life, he realized that all of that stuff wasn't what was most important to him, and what was most important to him was the relationships with his family and kids. So that's a good little message. And, I have to keep myself in check because I do have some fairly ambitious goals. And I also make sure that when I'm looking at what it is that I actually want to happen in my life and these experiences that I want to manifest, that I keep in check the fact that no amount of fame, no amount of money is going to, quote unquote, make me happy. Or in other words, no amount of money or fame has ever taken an unhappy person and then made them happy because they reached a certain dollar amount or they reached a certain, success in their career. And I mean, they've done so many studies on this that it's pretty hard to refute, but any study they've ever done on happiness makes it pretty clear that anybody who is happy or reports being happy, it's because of the quality of the relationships in their life, their close, intimate relationships, either their romantic relationships, their familiar relationships, their working relationships, are all deep and meaningful in terms of the connection that they have, the authenticity that they have with other human beings, and that any level of financial success beyond, abject poverty, or to put it another way, if you're keeping the bills paid, if you have a place to live and you've got food in your belly, that pretty much no amount of financial gain above that has any sort of correlation with increased happiness. Or to put another way, if you're making $100,000 and then you start making $1 million, it's not like you're 10 times happier because you're making $1 million instead of $100,000. Like happiness, there's no real, there's no real connection to financial growth and happiness growth. That you can be completely happy and barely be making any money at all. Again, as long as your bills are paid and you're not in poverty. What really makes happiness is quality relationships. And so something that I always keep in mind, again, and that doesn't mean it's not okay to have big goals and to have big ambitions and to desire great success and big career achievements and all of that. I think all of that's great. But if those achievements come at the expense of quality relationships, then there's a high probability that any sort of financial achievement is going to be met with a lot of hollow unhappiness. So that to me is maybe the overall theme of this book is manifest whatever you want, manifest success, manifest wealth. But if at the same time you are also not manifesting deep, meaningful connections and relationships with the people in your life that you love, then those financial successes are not going to provide any happiness or any fulfillment whatsoever. All right, everybody. That is all for today. I hope you're all doing well. Your dreams are coming true. You're finding happiness, fulfillment, and joy in your lives. I am going to be, I'm going to be hitting the road, everybody. I'm going to be leaving California here and then driving all the way over to New Mexico. I'm not going to do it probably all in one solid drive, but I'm going to, I'll probably break it up, but I've got a show in New Mexico tomorrow night on Thanksgiving, so I will be checking in with you on the road tomorrow on Thanksgiving for another episode of the Paul Green Comedy Podcast. For now, this episode is for November 26th, 2024, episode 334. I know I'm releasing this a little late, but I'm releasing it. All right, everybody. I will talk to you tomorrow.